Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. Me, Craig Hammond here. Excited to talk to him on the podcast. Did you find what you were looking for? And Craig is a good friend. Over the last few years, he and I have been involved in one of the businesses that he founded called Peejamas. I was an investor 3-4 years ago, and that's how initially we started working. A really big fan of Craig and how he prioritizes his family and just the balance and the life that I feel like he pursues. I'm excited to just introduce you all to him and hear a little bit about his story and how he's finding balance, or maybe not finding balance, and how he wants to find more. I don't know what we'll hear. I don't know what he's going to say exactly. So Craig, over to you. Why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit better, a little bit more, talk about your family, kind of your background, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll jump into some other.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the concept for your podcast. It's unique, right? You hear a lot of people talking about themselves or about their professional aspirations or personal aspirations, but I love the unique approach that you have to it. So thanks for having me. Yeah, so as you mentioned, we're in the thick of Peejamas right now and everything that we're kind of building along or within that, which has been fun. It's been about 6 or 7 years, almost 7 years, that it's been my real focus. My background is very much just naturally in entrepreneurship, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about that as the course of the interview goes on. But it's something that is just kind of inherently in me. I always kind of knew that I wasn't the type to work for somebody else, not an ego thing, not I can't take directions. It's just part of kind of my DNA that I need to be creating, conceptualizing, creating, and growing and building. That's where I really, really thrive professionally and personally. Background, as I've mostly grown up in Utah. Oddly enough, just for the listeners, Thaddeus knows this, but I'm originally from Southern California, where Abby, Thaddeus' wife, is also from. It's crazy. I think I probably moved before she was even born, but I've been in Utah.
Well,
Really
and Craig,
raised
you
here.
should tell them how you lived across from the Dallas Cowboys practice
Oh yeah,
facility.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of cool.
It's super cool. It's hard to talk about the Cowboys now, not because they're not good, though this year that's debatable, but just the constant, they're kind of like a good microcosm of questionable leadership, I guess. But yeah, my house was maybe a block or so away from, I think it's Pacific Lutheran University. It's a small Lutheran college there in Thousand Oaks. And the Dallas Cowboys would do their summer training camp. And they had this program where kids would be assigned their own Dallas Cowboy player. And I remember as a kid, so we moved here when I was to Utah when I was like 6 or something. So some of my earliest memories are taking, again, this is going to go over your head, but like, it seems like all of the like water bottles that we had in my house in the 80s were like a vomit green. It's like what you can imagine out of like the 70s and 80s. But I remember filling that up and, making like Gatorade with the pouch and taking it down to our players and watching them scrimmage and watching them practice. And we'd walk into the locker room, had them over to our house. Like it was so neat. To the credit of the Dallas Cowboys, this would have actually been pre-Jerry Jones. That is how you build lifelong loyalty to your customers or to your fans, right? Is get them involved, right? Like that's why I've considered myself, if I were to say I have a team now, it's probably still the Dallas Cowboys because of that. So anyway, that was an awesome thing to experience. Oddly enough, I don't think I told you this, Thaddeus, but a few years ago, I got some tickets to go to the Hall of Fame enshrinement and got to go meet all of the inductees, went to the game. And one of the inductees was a gentleman named Gil Brandt. He's kind of considered the godfather for what is like how scouts grade players now coming into the NFL. So pretty like revolutionary. And he bounced around a bit, but really he developed this scouting system while he was at the Dallas Cowboys. And so when I met him, I mentioned that to him. I said, hey, I grew up in Thousand Oaks and would go to the games and everything. And we talked about my player. I said, yeah, the player that I remember having, at least maybe the last year that I was in California, was Thornton Chandler. And this guy goes, tight end, number 89 out of Alabama. And I was like, yeah, like he was number 89. It's really cool. Like just kind of see it come full circle a little bit. But yeah, so we moved to Utah when I was
cool.
about 6, raised here, spent some time overseas, spent some time in Arizona for school, lifelong Utah. Love getting outside of Utah, but we just have so much here and love our location, the mountains, nature, and everything so much that it'd be hard for us to relocate at this point. But yeah,
You've been to
met
Europe
my
a few
wife.
times this year, though, right? Like 5 times.
I think only 3, maybe 4, but yeah, we've been traveling a fair amount to Europe, which has been a fun experience that we can for sure talk about. But what's most important that I haven't talked about is my family. I've been married to my wife now. She just had her birthday yesterday. She turned 39, but we've been married for 14 years now and have 4 kids, and our 5th and I think final on the way now. And really, like, they're my priority. You know, I have aspirations professionally, but and some of it's certainly to meet my own creative appetite and drive. But I don't know that I'd have the same ambition or drive if I was single. The drive is really for my family more so than any personal fulfillment.
No, I can attest. I've seen that in you, and I remember even having an investor call, and that was something that you made clear to people, an investor that was considering investing in the business. And I thought that was really admirable to make that clear. You know, a lot of people would sell their soul for an investor or a partner like that. Your first comment is, I choose balance, I choose my family. So I'm curious, one comment you made there, you said you're kind of an entrepreneur by your DNA. Do you believe that people are born entrepreneurs, or can somebody become an entrepreneur? I'm just curious your thoughts there based on that comment.
Yeah, I think people can absolutely become an entrepreneur, right? The older I get, the more that I just see that change is inevitable, right? We grow and change and adapt as humans. And so I think there's a lot of people, pardon me, background noise. I think there's a lot of people that could become entrepreneurs, but I do think that it's most often kind of inherent, right? I guess I shouldn't say it's in my DNA, because I remember when I was coming out of my undergrad, my dad was like, "You gotta go get a job at a big company. I can introduce you to a few of these businesses that I have good relationships with." He spent his career in med devices, in medical, and it can be a very lucrative industry and career, right? And he did quite well. And I remember thinking, kind of pushing back, and some of this was like the ego of, your early 20s and late teens or whatever. But I just thought, like, in my mind, like, vomit, like, that sounds so awful. I don't want to go work for a big company. I will say that there's tremendous value in doing that, right? But I just kind of always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think the first time that was clear, when I understood what an entrepreneur was in a high school class, my senior year. They were starting a new class called Business and Entrepreneurship. They hadn't offered it before, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And we had to come up with a product. We had to conceptualize a product. It didn't necessarily need to be a brand new invention, but come up with a product based on an opportunity, like a market opportunity, actually launch the product, sell it, and see how it performed. The class all did. It wasn't like a group thing. It wasn't an individual thing. And this isn't me like gloating, but I was like, "Guys, this product is really big." It was late 90s, early 2000s, like, visors were really big at the time, right? And I was like, let's do branded visors and apparel for our high school. We can sell them games, little league games. And so again, like, this is very small market opportunity, but that's what we went with, and it was profitable, and we made our money back. And it was then that I was like, this is kind of like this is like who I am. Like, I kind of felt like this is what I like doing.
I like that. So, I like that a lot.
I think typically it's kind of inherent in most entrepreneurs.
Do you think what would be, if you were looking at interviewing a group of 10 people, and you're saying, hey, I want to find those that maybe have these inherent tendencies to be an entrepreneur, what characteristics would you be looking at in these 10 people to kind of give you that clue that you think they're a successful entrepreneur?
That's a great question.
And maybe what do you see in yourself that makes you an entrepreneur? And then obviously those would be found in other people.
That's not gonna be fair, because if it was just myself, I'll say like weird, awkward. Like,
I think there's something to that though. There's something
no,
to that.
there is. I say that partially in jest, but typically you're a little different in the sense that you may be a little counterculture, not speaking of like pop culture or anything, but like typically you go against the grain a little bit more. It doesn't necessarily mean you are an individual or like a loner, but that you might stand out from the crowd because you might approach things in a different way than the majority of people. I think creativity is a must, and that does not mean like, oh, it means you can paint or draw anything, but it kind of goes along the same lines of thinking outside of the box, right? Like, you probably, I think most entrepreneurs probably have a lot of curiosity that leads into that creativity, right? Just kind of always wondering why things are the way they are and whether that is done in the best way possible. I think that's I think if successful entrepreneurs are creative and curious, but what differentiates in my opinion, a lot of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs are those that will take that curiosity and the creativity, meaning they look at they look at anything in life and they think, why is it done like that? There might be a better way. And then they actually conceptualize the better way and then follow through with that. I think that is a key component to being successful. And we can of course get into like how you want to define success, but you have to be able to like execute. And I think honestly, that's the hardest part. I hear that from people all the time, like, oh, I have so many ideas, but like, I don't actually like follow through. It's hard to follow through, but that's typically like the big separator in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think when I was first starting out, I was concerned about getting NDAs for my ideas, and then you realize like, come on, other people have had those ideas. I think one thing I've learned, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, it will kind of tie us into some next steps in the conversation. That mentality that you just talked about, right? Like questioning, is this the best way? Is there a better way to do something? I think it's a really powerful mentality that sometimes we isolate into just business forum and business setting. At least I noticed that in myself, right? Because you come home and you have kids, and if you are built that in, if you've wired your brain to think that, then you say, well, there's got to be a better way to be a father, right? Than what I'm doing. And hey, if you keep going down that line, well, there's got to be a better way to be connected spiritually. There's got to be a better way to, right? And like, if you think about that mindset, it's really healthy in challenging the norm in every aspect of your life. But I find that I really often, early on anyways, isolated it to just business. I'm curious if you've had those experiences. And then the second thing I want to say is that same mentality has also been a huge enemy for me, because how often can I sit still and look at something and say, gosh, this is great just the way it is, rather than, man, like I'm sitting, like last night I was sitting in my hot tub at my house, and I noticed something about my house, and I just spent the rest of the time in the hot tub thinking about how I could make that better, right? Instead of being like, sitting here with my wife, having a great talk, having a great experience. So I want to talk about the dichotomy there. So first, how can you make sure that you apply that mentality that you just talked about across other areas of your life? How have you done it in your experiences? And then I want to talk about kind of the flip side of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it takes a tremendous amount of intent and effort to be able to have that same curiosity and drive and compartmentalize it to just business or your project or whatever. And then being able to then shift that focus to, like you said, your family, your personal well-being, your health. And what I found that works best for me, that is not inherent to who I am, is having structure and routine. like I used to kind of pride myself on, oh, like spontaneity. I'm like tumbleweed, like I'm just getting blown around, like, but really for me to be able to be, and this is not me implying that I am always achieving my best performance, specifically with personal and family or really anything, but trying to be consistent with their routines is what I've found helps me the most. Right.
Balance.
And so, yeah. And
Give me an example.
Something that's important to me outside of like family and work is my health, my own exercise routine. Right. And I've always been pretty active. I grew up playing a lot of sports, being outside in nature and stuff. Like a lot of kids that played high school sports, you're like, oh, I want to like lift weights, like whatever. Well, what I've really found is like, it's not just this like, I'm going to go lift weights, I'm going to hit it hard. It's about consistency. And that's part of the routine, right? And so for me, years ago, this was probably 10 years ago. I had always been active, like I said, but for several years, I trained quite a bit for triathlons, and that was fun, but like still not as consistent as I'd like. But what I found was that by being intentional in the timing as much as possible, it's hard to be perfect, but the routine and structure of timing, meaning if I want to be my best self throughout the day, approach work with as much effort and attention as I possibly can, have time after work to be able to be present and focus on my family, I'd have to put forth the effort and the discipline to get up early in the morning, which also is not something that I'm kind of more a natural night owl. And so I had to try and be consistent at getting up at 5 or 5:30 and spending time alone, being still, like you said. I love that. To be able to read and study, and I try to journal and plan out my day, try to pray and meditate, and then get into the physical activity. And I try to do all of that before 7:30, 8 a.m. when my kids are getting up and getting ready for school, so that I know I'm setting the tone of my day physically and mentally by getting those things in the morning first thing, because then it's not left to try and squeeze them in later in the evening or sacrificing time from my family, which is very important to me. So that's just one example and kind of how I try to do it. It's very hard. I know we've talked about this in our conversations, like balancing schedules. My wife wants to get into the gym as well, and so I can't always be as consistent as I'd like in that specific routine, but setting a routine and holding yourself accountable to it as much as you possibly can is within reason has helped me so much.
So maybe if we extrapolate that routine comment across other avenues, other areas of our life, if you want to be a better father, setting time and a routine for your interactions with your kids or your wife or your mom or your sister or something to that effect, would you agree that same habit allows you to kind of create that balance across, or create that same entrepreneurship focus across life?
Yeah, I think having structure naturally enables us to be able to do that, right? It's not always as easy when you have to factor in various schedules and commitments of other people and stuff like that. But as much as you can try and be intentional around that specific goal, it's certainly easier and more powerful. Like you mentioned kids, like any parent knows, I would assume that giving kids one-on-one time, so amazing. It's amazing for them, and it's amazing for you as a parent. I have this, I wouldn't even say goal. I haven't written it down. I haven't like put it somewhere where I can visibly see it. But I really want to get to where I can take like an evening walk with each of my kids and getting my wife included in there each day. right? So Monday might be one child, Tuesday will be the second child. And having one, it's really good for your health, especially after eating. But
For dinner.
two, like it gives you that time with that kid. And by doing it in a specific time, that works with everybody's schedule when we're ideally trying to all have a meal together. And then they know, like, Tuesday, I'm going to go with Dad on my walk
with that.
It's something that I'd love to do, but it's harder, like I said, when you're trying to factor in. I mean, our kids each of them are in like 3+ sports, and we've got, church commitments and community commitments. It's really hard. It's really hard to be consistent in those.
I think, to your point, I think it's freaking hard. I had this epiphany years ago that was like the amount of time I put into planning for my business is substantially more than the amount of time I put into planning for my family, my wife, my personal health, my spirituality. Do you think that there's ever a world where that's not so imbalanced, or does the imbalance maybe not matter? Because you talk about the difficulty. Maybe the imbalance doesn't matter as long as the impact is there, right? But just curious, because I think it's demanding to be a professional, to be an entrepreneur, and that's not ever going to change. So teach your thoughts there.
I don't know that perfect balance is possible, right? Because I guess it could be, but our expectations need to change a lot if that's the case, right? But typically what you prioritize is where the weight of that balance is going to be focused, right? So perfect balance is hard. The way I kind of perhaps naively conceptualize it, because I'm not there yet, is so much, I started this by saying, like, so much of what I do is for my family. And there have been times where I've done well financially. I wouldn't consider myself like, if I stopped working today, I'd be done. In fact, far from it financially, right? So much of what I do is to try and ensure that my family and our unit is taken care of. And maybe naively, this may be naive, I'd actually like to hear your opinion on it. When I feel my family's well-being is not in question, and maybe that's a little loose, I could feel like I could reprioritize a little bit and achieve a little bit more balance on the personal or family side of things.
That's my question with this whole podcast is your comment there is like, does the ability, because I think, and maybe you were better, I have not talked to anyone that when they first started, they had no money, they had no foundation, that they said, gosh, I just want to do good in the world and help people. And like, that's all I care about. Money is always the forefront, like making money, and whether that money is used for their family, or it's used for a nice car or a watch or a house or a travel or just an appearance and a lifestyle. Like, I think that regardless of what maybe that money's goal is, it has to be part of that primary motivation. And so then at some point, is there ever a point where you feel like it's enough, right? Is there ever a point where you can say, guys, I achieved financial success, I'm good? And that's another thing I haven't found a lot of personally, and interacting with people. So I guess to your question, the right answer to me is we have to find it in the grind, and we have to find that balance in the grind. Is that realistic? I sure as hell didn't do it. I'm not here to say that I did, right? And I think I'm not doing it. I think I'm on a journey to do it. But that's just, is it possible? Yeah, it is. In fact, the question I asked Siri today was, or not Siri, ChatGPT. I like to have like my morning meditations. I include ChatGPT, right? So if you ever see my ChatGPT thing goes public, it's got all kinds of crazy questions, and it just helps me like get perspective back. Just like, and so my question today was, this is the exact question I was asking was, is it possible for somebody to live beyond survival if they're in survival mode, right? Is it possible to focus on things outside of survival if we are still focused on survival. ChatGPT's opinion is incredibly difficult to focus on. This is their response. It's incredibly difficult to focus on deeper spiritual matters when physical needs are unmet. Humans are wired to prioritize survival, so when the basic needs like food, water, shelter, and safety are lacking, it naturally consumes much of one's attention and energy. This is recognized even in psychological theories like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which suggests that unless basic physical and safety needs are met, people may struggle to focus on higher level needs such as love, belonging, and self-actualization. However, history and religion's tradition shows some individuals, even in extreme hardship, can still access this deeper sense of meaning or faith, right? So I think to your question, and that's like the whole question I ask everybody on this show, is it possible? I haven't done it. Maybe other people are along that journey more, but just curious. I appreciate your question back, and I think you're right on with like creating these habits and processes, really, right? Of prioritizing your family and your health and your other aspects are one of the key ways to do it.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because I've noticed that a bit in my own life over the last year and a half. We've talked a little bit about this just in conversations when we were on that trip in Germany and stuff last month. But I don't feel like I'm the best version of myself currently, even compared to 2 years ago, because of some of the survival needs, right? That do totally consume you. And I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective. And ChatGPT actually is largely or is correct, or at least fair logic, right? That if our physical needs and survival aren't being met or are in question or threatened, it's normal for some of those other things to be lacking or to take kind of a back seat. I think that's natural. But at the same time, like part of our goal or part of my goal is to like not let the natural instincts rule my decisions or my life and my like happiness or my well-being. I'm not saying I do, right? I just said like the last year and a half, I haven't been my best self. So it's very much a goal, and like I believe that we could, but very, very hard, to achieve just contentness with so much uncertainty of surviving. It's hard.
Well, and I think for the listeners, Craig has been running Peejamas for 7 years and has sold over 100,000 units for sure. And it's an amazing product that's really helping kids in the potty training journey, right? Basically it's a pull-up built into a jammy, but it's reusable. My kids use it, and I found it to be really successful, which is why I invested in Craig's business. But I think that due to some supply chain issues and some issues that have been ongoing, the business has been really struggling. And it's coming out of that struggle, which I think is a great feeling probably for Craig. But I appreciate your authenticity. Yeah, who you were 2 years ago maybe would have been, you believe, better version of who you are today. When you say that, what does that like make you feel inside? I'm just curious, because that's a really like honest expression.
Yeah. Some of it's a little like remorse, right? Like, I'm not the best version of myself, and you know that. So some remorse, some pain, like there's been real like personal pain, right? Of like, this is so hard. And there's times where, or one time, one of our cars, like a year and a half ago, you may have not even remember this. You were like, man, I remember times where I'd go home from work and you're already spent, who knows, 10 plus hours. He said, I wanted to just bury myself alive. And I was like, yeah, that's accurate. That's accurate. But here's the other thing that I've learned is that I have a lot of fortitude and grit, more than I believed 2 years ago. And so through pain and through challenge that like I wouldn't have preferred that our entire supply chain would have just completely fallen apart and put our business like on the ropes. Man, I've definitely learned that I can put up with a lot more than I thought I could before all that happened, So it's been like I said, it's been hard. There's a little remorse or regret, like, oh, like I could have handled this situation better. I could have been like, I could have stood like immovable with like concrete down my spine and legs that I'm like unshakable. But that didn't happen, right? Like I haven't been as good as I believe that I was 2 years ago, but I've also learned a great deal about myself. And I am still happy that I haven't abandoned what is most important to me. Really, it is those things that are most important to me that have sustained me through that challenge.
Yeah. No, I've watched, being able to, I know Craig pretty well, watched him take time out of very stressful situations and environments to go on a little road trip with his family, or attend a kid's
Coach
soccer or
sports.
football, or coach sports. I mean, I think it's hard to do that. I remember there, I don't know, I think I told you this, but like the most depressing moment of my life was when we were, close to not being able to meet payroll, and my wife was going through, she had just had a miscarriage. And this was several years ago. We were struggling to meet payroll. We had about 60,000 or 60 employees at the time. Basically, there was no way we could meet payroll, the truth. And we were in the mall because my wife, in that moment, I was not open with her with my struggles. And I think that's one thing I've learned is, there's a whole community that can support you if you let it. But she didn't know what was going on, and she wanted a swimsuit because she figures if she had just lost the baby, and it's a really emotional and challenging time to lose a baby. And I don't think I realized that going into this experience. I wasn't there for my wife enough. But one of the things that she's like, all right, I can get a cute swimsuit because I'm not pregnant anymore. I can wear it this summer. And I said, sweet, let's go to the mall. And I just remember feeling like life wasn't worth living, if I was being honest. So I can relate so much to these struggles, and it's been exciting for me to watch Craig work through it. And I think now, looking at the end, you're kind of looking backwards now as things are getting so much better in your business. Yeah, it's probably a relief that you stuck with it, and you find a sense of peace and excitement.
Yeah. And, that's a great story. I didn't know you guys got through that, but great story in the sense of like it's relatable, right? It's very authentic. Not obviously going through that. I think on that point, you have to really have belief and conviction in the purpose of like
Purpose.
what you're doing and why you're kind of willingly, sacrificing or putting yourself through such a hard time, but also believe in yourself that you can pull yourself or the business or whatever out of that tailspin or that nosedive, right? Like it's hard. It's really hard. There were several times where I was just like, I'm so tired. It's like I could do something easier. I could go somewhere and make more money, but I believed in the vision and in what we were working on to not just come out of that proverbial nosedive, but be able to like start really gaining altitude and achieve the vision that we were working towards. And it's awesome to see. Like we're not there yet, as you know, but like every day is getting closer, and it's noticeably better, So it takes effort.
I'm curious. So, Craig, throughout your journey, you've had some small exits. You've been a part of a variety of different companies. How has what success is changed for you, and what would you consider success at this point in your life? You've been working 20 years now. So what would you say?
You kind of mature in expectations, right? And I don't want to say that is like you sacrifice or like level set your goals, but I think as you go through successes and through challenges, you maybe become a little bit more of a realist. Like I remember like in college, I was like, 100 million, I'll be good. Just like now, I'm like 100 million. Like, what was I thinking? I'm an idiot. So you become more realistic. This might be a little like vague, and hopefully I can kind of bring it together to make sense.
I want to come back to that 100 million question, but 100 million comment. But just keep going. I don't want to interrupt.
What I've realized, like a core belief of mine, is that we tend to prioritize and want what we didn't have, maybe as kids.
Yeah.
Meaning, so like in my own experience, right? Like my family was not like super wealthy. I would say we were probably upper middle class. By any outside view, we may have looked like we had it all, right? Like my
Yeah.
dad built this big old house, pool, sports court, big yard. Like from the outside, it looked great, right? And
Yeah.
but like internally, as like a family nucleus, like wasn't really strong. I have a good relationship with my dad, but a lot of my memories as a kid are like he's not in a lot of them, which
Yeah.
sounds bad. Applying this belief of mine to him, and his pursuits when he was my age or whatever in his career is probably because he didn't grow up with like a whole lot materialistically, and so that really drove him, right? And now, while I do have financial goals, because whether it's my personal truth, but like my background and just my experiences, I want a family. I don't need the 10,000 square foot house. I don't need big exotic trips. Like I need family. I need time with my kids. I need time with my wife. I need those relationships because it's like I don't mean to say like I had a bad family. We had a good family. Like I'm very close to my mom. I'm close to my dad now. But I want my kids to have what I didn't have.
Yeah.
And so that's how I view success is like I want to achieve for myself and for my family what I maybe felt was lacking a bit when I was a kid. And I don't know if that like fully applies, but that's kind of what drives me, and is that it applies to business. Like you've mentioned, like there's times that I choose to leave work at 3 p.m. because my kids have a soccer game at 3:30, and that obviously may just inherently or naturally leads to sacrificing something to get done in that moment at work, and may sacrifice like my wallet or my pocketbook or my bank account or whatever. But I do believe that success with my family is more important, and that I can still and will be like achieve my professional or financial goals to what I would consider successful while still prioritizing those other things that are more important to me. Being successful in those arenas and areas is more important. I don't know if that really answered your question, but
when you originally wanted the 100 million, and I think we'll tie this back in, why did you think you needed $100 million?
because I was stupid. I don't know. Like,
Did you have any logic behind 100 million as your number?
No, I think I didn't realize. I know for sure when I was younger that I didn't realize that being, again, I'm going to use a generality here, but like being financially successful, being wealthy, we'll say, I didn't realize it's quite hard. Like, yes, there are people that like might fall into it, that there might be some luck, but it's not something that's just like, oh, I can just like talk to somebody and suddenly I'm going to make $1 million. Like it's hard. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes consistency. And I don't think that I fully grasped that at the time. And the like number is like, there's zero logic to it, zero. And I think the other thing I didn't really comprehend is like how much money that is. Like you don't need 100 million to like be set. You don't need close to that to be set. But I think maybe at the time I thought that's kind of the number you need to like, be able to like be financially independently wealthy and take it easy. Yeah. You've matured much faster than I have.
Well, I think it's a common story though. I have learned for myself and in my conversations with people. Obviously, my job, I talk to people about money and what they need, what they expect every day. So it's funny because when people are starting out in their careers, that number is always higher, right? It's always high. And then as you get going, it's like, well, wait a second. Like, I would have been okay with that, like with this number and that number. And I've even talked to, I probably have 3 stories coming in my mind right now of people that could have sold business, stock, etc. for, let's say, X, and they thought, well, I need Y, and they hold on, and then when they come back around, they don't even get X anymore. Now they're getting something lower, and they said, I would have loved X, right? I know for me, like when I sold the business, when I started my business, it was, I didn't have experience, I didn't have money. So I gave equity freely to people that had experience and money. And I probably didn't vet it very well. Kyle, my partner, and I both were a little bit too free with it. And so we ended up selling the business, and Kyle and I, who were the only active co-founders and partners, only owned about 50-ish% of our company when we actually ended up selling the business. Well, that was when we merged. We ended up owning about like 20, 25-ish%, 30% of the total pie when we sold the business. And I remember at first feeling like frustrated, like how unfair is this situation that somebody that didn't sacrifice, all these years and this effort is making all this money. And then I came back to the Charlie Munger quote where somebody asked him, hey, are you frustrated? Warren Buffett's worth $100 billion and you're only worth, $3 billion. How do you feel about that? Are you angry about that? And his comment was, are you asking me if I'm angry that I have $3 billion? And that perspective is like, well, when you add comparison to anything, it makes you feel like 100 million is necessary because this guy over here, he's got a house built in Lake Powell. This guy over here, he's flying in his private jet. And this guy over here, he's got a 10,000 square foot house in 3 states. Well, yeah, like those are great things, but are they necessary for your happiness and your goals that you just talked about? Because to me, Craig, the family, the life that you just talked about, it's not an expensive life. Right? It's not a hugely expensive life. So that to me is just like we create these measures of success based largely on other people. I'm curious your thoughts on that. And Clayton Christensen talks about it, like how we measure life. But if we fast forward, Craig, 10 years from now, and you're looking at these last 10 years, hopefully able to say that you're a better person 10 years from now, you're living your life better than you were. What does that look like for you? I'm curious if you've thought about that, or maybe that definition, clarity, et cetera, of what that is.
Yeah, I actually have, because again, goalposts move, right? They tend to move a lot, especially for people like us, or really anybody. But I think being content for me or like being successful is the lifestyle that I have now, like from the outside, right? Like going to kids' games, helping coach, being with my family as much as possible without being distracted here.
Yeah.
Because in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, let's say I'm coaching kids, proper technique in football practice. In the back of my mind, I'm still thinking, are we going to make payroll this week or this month? Or like, I didn't get that email out, or a variety of things, right? It's that distraction and not being mentally present. I'm physically there, but I'm not mentally there or emotionally there. Success in my mind is honestly like what I have now, but without the constant percolating thoughts that are distracting me, that are all like at their root are financially motivated, right? Or financially like dependent. So I don't have a number anymore, right? Like as I've matured, it's not this 100 million. I know you and I were talking like about like what could somebody retire on and live comfortably and stuff. I don't have a set number right now.
Yeah.
The lifestyle that I have without having to worry about the finances.
The basics. Yeah.
And when I am there,
I like that a lot.
Or there again, like, let me add a caveat. It's not just like my family's okay right now for like the next year or 2 years, but like money's not an issue.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. For the rest of your life, you're set up. No, I like that. I think that's really admirable. And I think I want to talk to you in 10 years and see if it stays the same, because I think the challenge is, as the money comes, are you able to maintain that perspective of, like, I love the house that I have today. I really love the car I drive today, the clothes I wear, the places I travel, right? Or do we start to say,
Lifestyles
"God,
change. Yeah.
gosh, well, now that I can afford it, let's go get a bigger house, And I think that to me is, to your point, the true definition of success. When you can find happiness, not having the biggest, the nicest, the most perfect house. When you can find happiness in that, the simplicity of life. So I really, really admire that. And I've seen that in you, in the conversations we've had. So I think to wrap up today, I ask everybody this as the last question, and we've pretty much answered this, but do you believe that you have found anything that you were looking for so far in your journey, or have you had to change what you were looking
Yeah, I think both, right? Because I'm not there yet. And what
for?
I guess this kind of goes back to one of the first things I said is like, I'm always looking. I'm always
Yeah.
wondering. I'm always questioning. So I've found some of what I'm looking for, right? Like you've mentioned, I've had some small exits that have been nice windfalls. And then I've also had to like use that money on stupid things that I haven't wanted to spend the money on. So, but
Yeah.
I've found some of what I'm looking for. I think I'll always be looking though. I'll always be
Yeah.
asking. And like I know that might leave this a little open-ended, not like a
That's
whole
good
lot of
though.
like
That's how
certainty in the end, but that's
life
honestly
is
like
that
that's
way.
the real answer. That's the real answer
Yeah.
is like I'm finding what I'm looking for, but I'll always be looking.
I really appreciate that and your authenticity there. I think it's human nature to want a black and white, buttoned up answer, buttoned up life, buttoned up ending, buttoned up, whatever. And we think of finalities in black and white, and it's just, that's not life, unfortunately. So who we are today, I mean, tomorrow we can be completely different unless we continue the same course that we're on. Appreciate it, Craig. I am so grateful for you taking an hour with us today with me. Sure we'll talk again today or later. Anyways,
2 hours.
thank you. Yeah,
No, my
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Yeah, we do have a call in 2 hours, so it's great to talk to you twice today. Have a great rest of your day, and I appreciate you joining today.
Thanks, man. Always love our chats and getting my mind thinking.
Yeah, no, thank you. See you, Greg.